Hi, everyone, and welcome to this session of the Thriving Families Africa Summit. Today, our topic is at the intersection of science, parenting, and purpose. We're talking about raising creative and confident girls from a dad's perspective, from a researcher's perspective, and everything in between. So, our guest, Sam Munyuwiny, I hope I've said your last name the right way. You will correct me if I haven't. Sam is the founder and director of the African Institute of Child Studies. He will tell us more about what AICS does. We have crossed paths over the years, and we've found areas of collaboration, areas of similar interest, because we are all looking at the well-being of the child. And the unique lens that Sam brings is he combines data, lived experience, and really a real concern for the next generation, not just of girls, but of young people. And Sam, thank you so much for saying yes to this conversation. We are very honored to have you here. Karibu.
Thank you, Dr. Chakua. And I prefer to call you Carol perhaps
Yes,
because
please.
we had a journey.
Yes, please. Can we keep it that way? Yeah.
Congratulations for just organizing this summit. I think this is really something that we need more and more. Yes.
Yeah.
Did you give me the okay to introduce myself a bit more?
Sure, go ahead.
Yes, and you did well. Yes, it's Munyuwiny.
Ah.
You're among the few people who pronounce it right.
Mm.
And I am a father of girls, 3 girls and 1 boy.
Yeah.
So I think this topic is one that I have to be very careful about because I'll be measured against it at home. So I hope when the people watch the YouTube later, they will. And I've been privileged to be among those who founded the African Institute for Children's Studies or Child Studies. This is way back in 2009 in Kenya. So that's about 15 years or more of operating in the African space. And we've been registered later on in 2021 in the US because it's about sharing a global perspective on what works, what doesn't work, and bringing together experts, providing a platform where young people, community groups, experts like yourself, researchers, can convene and create solutions on various issues that impact on children and child well-being. And therefore, this to me is one of those issues that are found major and relates very well to our current priority areas, which include addressing malnutrition, keeping children in school, and safe use of internet, with an approach that begins with how do we support adolescent girls and teenage mothers around the journey of taking care of themselves, but also the children that they do have.
Yeah, and I think one of the gaps we have in our continent is lack of evidence. So you're really bringing in a rich contribution into this space. Not that we don't have evidence, it's just that it wasn't recorded, the data has not been put down, and I think it's important. The more we get this data, the more we realize how alike we are. And so we can't be disjointed anymore and say, these are Western things, these are African things. We are really humans at the very basic. And I think what it takes to raise creative and confident girls cuts across, right?
That's right. The thing about working in various contexts is you interact with people and you get to the humanness of them, if there's any English like that. And you appreciate that we are pretty the same. We are wired pretty the same. And therefore, I believe this conversation does not only relate to people in Africa, but you're also right that there are certain cultural contexts that demand that we look at our own data and still look at how we creating our laws and policies in a way that will be responsive to the cultural context. And that's really the one reason we started the African Institute. So while we're looking inward, we are also keen to learn from each other and share that knowledge and make visible what we do. So one of the things that we've been driving of late is what we call localization. It's a global conversation, but at the bottom of it is really asking ourselves, are we allowing the local knowledge to drive our innovation, our policy and programming around that? So that's very key. We've had conferences where we've looked at, is it true that Africa contributes less than 1% of the global research output? Or is it that it is just not acknowledged the way it is? And therefore it's not being measured, it's not being counted. Yes, so I think there's really room for that. And There's a lot of research happening. There's a way we communicate what works for us that also should be appreciated. And I think that's what we need to bring on board.
Yeah. So narrowing it down to this topic, these specific topics, let's just start with the foundation. What would you highlight in like the earliest years that sets girls up for creativity and for confidence?
Right. Well, and maybe even before we go into that, I know I like your approach of also asking us as people work in the space what really bothers us most or what is at the top of our hearts. And I did share that I'm keen on raising creative and confident girls. One, I think because I am a parent of girls, so I'm there, I'm thinking, oh, if I'm out of the space, what will I leave with my girls? And so I think that to me is very important. But I genuinely believe in the leadership of girls and women. About a few months ago, we did advertise and we wanted a CEO, and we were very deliberate. We want a young female because I believe in that. And so for me, it's drawn by that belief. And of course, I know we are at a point where there are leaderships around, maybe Tanzania and other places that have brought in another dimension of asking ourselves, does it always work? Yeah. But we know from a lot of data that when you invest in women, the return on investment on investing in women is pretty big. They say for every $1 or for every 1% increase in investment in girls, whether in their education, access to healthcare, it gives you an extra 0.3% per capita. Let's put that in figures, like in the case of Kenya, in an economy with about 15 trillion Kenyan shillings, by investing a little more, 1% more, so we'll be just asking ourselves, what are we currently investing in something like access to sanitary pads? Yeah. If you increase that by 1%, if you increase that by 1% in the other health sector, we're expecting about 45 billion shillings more in an annual increment, by that. And therefore, investing in women, again, household, think about within our household, within our cultural contexts, and even in the developed countries, still the role of a mother is really so special that we know even from a legal point that you'll expect that a child will stay in the early stages. The 0 to 3 years are so critical to any brain development. And therefore, at that stage, the naturally will be largely from a mother's point. And therefore, what you do at that stage is exactly what you harvest as a country a few years later on, thinking about the nutrition, and I'll come back to some of these things. So that to me is a very critical conversation that we must have on the table and ask ourselves, are we preparing the mothers? Because right from conception, it is what the mother has that we all harvest as a country. And we know it. For example, if you're going to have mothers who are in drugs, then the risk of raising children with disability is much higher. It's increased. And therefore, motherhood is so important. But when we prepare mothers, we don't prepare mothers when they conceive. We prepare them when they're young girls. And therefore, raising confident and creative girls is much more than just talking about this individual. It is really preparing this person for that role. And maybe I can take us through a journey map on what does it take to really raise confident. But even as I'm doing that, I want to speak to something else that I've done in a number of my classes when we're doing parent coaching. Okay. This is one of those questions that, pre-training session that I ask. What is the most investment you will do for your child between education, maybe showing them love and building their self-esteem? What will be the most important thing? Not everyone gets it, but the truth is self-esteem is the most important thing that you can leave behind. Yeah. Because ultimately, we know that your child, and here I'm referring to this person that you brought in or took care of. It may not be biological, but you're responsible for them. Even when they are 40 or 50, you still know them as your child. True. And the decisions they make along the way is often directly linked to their self-esteem, to their confidence. So you cannot ignore that. Think about taking a loan to invest in a business, or even to quit a job and get into a business. It takes a lot of self-esteem. Yeah. The higher you are in your confidence level, the more you don't depend on approval by the people around you, the more you are able to get into that. You know, we've seen a lot of data showing how things such as substance use is directly linked to self-esteem levels. You know, your ability to want, you know, to manage the desire to belong, but still be yourself while in this crowd is a major determinant of how you will weave through, you know, that challenge. So let me at this point share my slide. I think that will help me tell the story much more easier. Give me a moment.
No problem. Take your time.
Yeah, so you see how that fits in all that. And maybe I could be talking to an audience here. Someone could be a young girl somewhere. And, you know, I tell my daughters, one of the things you ought to know about boys, and I'm taking myself back to a teenage boy and in my younger years, you know, there's just this element of feeling like the more you actually use and abuse girls, the more man you are. But, or even the confidence of being able to approach a girl is many times dependent on how much the girl is giving you a green light. So men are very cowards. I'm not talking to my girls here. They're actual cowards until you really give them room to know how far they can go. And so your confidence level, your ability to ask, what do you want? Can you speak clearly? So that sort of helps to set out a stage where you're able to manage your relationship with the opposite sex, but also, more importantly, manage any abusive relationships that may come in. So to me, that's really why I want to speak about this matter. So confirm you can view my screen?
Yes, I can see it.
Good. So now I know we're talking about two things, having confident and creatives. And I think they're pretty linked because being creative demands that you step out of the normal, you know, and be ready to look different. And being different demands that you are confident in your own skin. Right? You know, you're confident in that you will sound different. And that's where enterprises really go into. So how do we get this 25-year-old young woman to be able to do those things? Like I said earlier on, it really begins from very early on. So the 0 to 5 are really, really important. And let me just point out some of the things that matters at this stage. So number one, there's the stage where the person is being formed, the brain development. Because the truth again is, you know, think about your ability to have a conversation with people. It will rely on your vocabulary, it will rely on your emotional intelligence, it will rely on your ability to assess the environment around you. And all that also depends on the brain power. So like at African Institute for Children's Studies, we are keen now on asking ourselves, what is the nutrition investment being done on 0 age, you know, from conception, from the time the child is in the womb. And that goes into even the parenting, you know, as a parent, and as soon as you know or you're planning to, or you're pregnant, then one really has to think about what kind of food am I giving out? Is it high in folic acid? Is it high in iron content? Because these things eventually do impact and get into the children and their well-being and their brain power. So that is very important. But also between the 0 to 5 years, there's a lot of desire for, you know, curiosity, imagination. And this is really where you kill it or you make it very early on. You know, unfortunately, there are things we say and we can try to be very protective, you know, like we'll expect boys to climb some things, the girls shouldn't climb. So there's a lot of don't and do that can really come in at that stage. And that can be a big challenge. So encouraging an atmosphere of free and structured play. And play is so important. So among the child rights that we do have is the right to play and spaces for play. And how that play is done and not engendered, not being designed that this is for boys, this is for girls, become very, very, very important. One of the other things I appreciated in those stages is storytelling. You know, like we'll be encouraged to go tell a story and put the children to bed. You know, at some point you may think it's just one of those things to really get them to sleep. But if you think about how brain development happens, the stories that you tell at that point, and here we need to talk about how we manage things like screen technology and really limit how much time we are leaving children to do that. It really helps at this stage that we tell stories without any aid of peppers or whatever. So one of the things I did with my girls a lot, when we're doing bedtime stories, I will do the action, so you'll be talking about the baboon came and walked and will do boom, boom. And when you're doing the boom, boom for a 2-year-old, you're creating imagination in their brains, and then they are able to build that and find the vocabulary. So it is stages when you really, really want to do a lot of investment around storytelling. So these are critical ages. Think about the food, think about removing very structured approach to things, limiting access to technology and all that. Yes. I don't know whether I should go through, or I'll let you, anything you're finding curious at the moment.
No, just go through. If there's anything I find curious, I'll chime in. But just what has stood out for me here, Sam, is the unstructured part of it. Because I'm just currently reading this book called The Anxious Generation, and how the rewiring of childhood. It's like childhood, we are rewiring childhood because of technology. And one of the things that comes out very clearly is we've made play places so structured, so safety conscious, and so we are overprotecting those spaces. And in fact, there's an image, this book, they have about a playground like 10 years ago, or maybe 15 years ago, and a playground now. It is so plastic. It is so structured. So we are just we say our kids are anxious, but we are bringing in a lot of anxiety there as well. And I think this unstructured play, we really need to figure out how to get back where they literally just hurt themselves,
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the games I played, I think they contribute a lot to what I do today. Going to lay traps for the rats in the fields, out there, and because it takes a lot of thinking and
creativity and imagination.
Yes,
do that,
strategy, and I've got to think about where's the wind flowing from, hitting from, how will the rats run, where's the usual route, how do I set up my trap, where do I, so there's a lot of opportunity when people go more natural and allow space for that. I mean, safety is definitely clear. And unfortunately, this will vary, of course, if someone is doing this in a very urbanized space.
Absolutely.
And those in the rural areas have a lot more privilege in being able to do this. So I think, to me, I find those very critical, and the role of fathers, even in the girls, those the very early ages, cannot be overemphasized. Is really, really important. Then you go into what I would call the middle childhood, the 6 to 11 years of age. Remember, now at this stage, we're introducing them to school. We're introducing them to another space. There is competition. Their social hierarchies, they begin showing up. Boys, girls, sometimes social status begin showing up. And I've had people even ask here, how much is it that I can tell my child, for example, as a parent, you're getting into a school where, you have different social and economic backgrounds, and how do we manage that? How do we weave our daughters or our sons, even for that matter, through that? But really important at this stage is, I think, being able to again allow them to weaver through this, and just know that what is most important is they can always come back home, and I'm always accepted. So I think being accepted back at home is really, really an important thing. And so that this comparison and the feeling that maybe I'm not like so and so, maybe the teasing that comes out, they get more aware now about how they look and versus how the other ones, it's the risk of being body shaming and all those things begin emerging even from these very early stages. And the role models, what are the teachers saying? What is the role of girls? What is the role of boys, and all that? So the language here really, really is very important. And the growth mindset must begin to be planted in them. The success mindset, the knowing that you are good as you are, that yes, you may not be exactly like the other person, but I have confidence in you. So what we say, the language is really important. So things such as, instead of telling people you can learn this like the other one, but encourage them in what they are good at. And I know in a country like Kenya, we are working now on a curriculum that has for many times tried to make all of us be the same. And that in itself was really a problem. I'm hopeful that if we invest as required within the competence-based education and curriculum, that hopefully will encourage an understanding that we can be different, but also introduce the role models very early there. So for me as a father, I go and cook. I have days when I have to go and cook, and we cook with the girls, and so that I'm removing this mindset that some things are only meant for another group. Of course, we are between cultures.
Yeah.
People like me are having a culture where my parents were strongly on the other side. The role differentiation was very strong. Today, unfortunately, that's not going to survive. So we've got to be very careful that we are not bringing what was in the previous cultures into this. Yeah. And then let's move to the adolescent. Now, generally, when there's a graph, hope you're seeing it. There's a chart here that where the confidence levels are rising initially in their middle childhood, and then they drop. And this is based on data that really shows a lot more girls will feel this way. You know, there's a sharp dip in their confidence levels. Why does this happen? There's a lot more peer pressure. But of course, for girls, there's also going to be, you know, the early onsets now of puberty and, you know, all the, how do I manage? I'm beginning to notice my menses. How do I manage that? So this is really a stage that all parents must be even more available. Really, you really want to be more available. You need to be more deliberate and not feeling judgmental. You need to help explain that this is what is going on. And for me, even as a father, you know, I want to be there, walk with my daughter, go and buy the sanitary pads and walk through and listen to them. How are you feeling about the pain? How do you manage that? So that it not feel like go and talk to your mother about that.
Yeah.
You know? Or who is the father figure? And I know sometimes you don't have the benefit of having, you know, the biological father there, but I will encourage that there is a father figure, whether it's within the settings of church or whatever other structure that you do have, that what the man communicates is really, really important. Again, remember at this stage, there's even a greater conscious of who I am and how I look like. And I want to be the first one to tell my daughter she is beautiful, you know, because that makes a lot of difference. So that when the young man out there who is out to really, you know, abuse or exploit does it, head doesn't spin, you know, like one of my friends says, he doesn't go like, oh, he just said I'm beautiful. I'm like, Daddy tells me that, you know. So we are really the first affirmers in that, and I think is really, really important. Now, there's been a big debate on the question of, you know, access to phones and social media. At what age should we do this? Is it protective if we keep it for longer? Is it better we introduce it earlier? Can be case by case, but we've seen in recent times countries such as Sweden have had to even change that. There's a general agreement that we should delay access to screen technology. I'm talking about TV and phones and all that up to over the age of 8. And even the longer you delay it, perhaps the better. A bit controversial, I must admit. I think the data is still shaping out. But I'm bringing this because social media and comparisons around social media have been shown to be huge in the effect on girls and their self-esteem. You know, a one show of rejection can leave many years of feeling like you are rejected. So are we prepared to help the girls navigate through that? Because remember, this is an age where belonging and you know, is very crucial for in terms of psychological development. You are an expert more in that, so I will not say a lot of that, but it is very, very important that then we're able to do that. So what can we do? Having creative spaces, again, you know, whatever the girl loves, can we build it on that? Okay, building systems where we really don't encourage and entertain abuse is very important, but also exposing them to digital literacy. Okay, I try to tell my girls, look, a lot of times by the time someone comes online, they're presenting either their best or their worst, because sometimes people are coming out there to rant out and to really deal with their own issues inside. So how do we prepare them for that? How do we prepare them that really behind all that, there is the actual person who is going through stuff? And this is where I was also mentioning, to what extent can I, as a father, show my weak side to my daughter? I honestly walk through it with them. Sometimes as a researcher, I'm sitting and preparing a report, and I've called my daughters, even when they were 6-year-old, I say, come and pray with me because I just can't crack this. I don't know how it's going, you know. So I think walking through my own journey with them and being vulnerable will prepare them so that when they are hit by the world out there, when they're going through their own difficult moments, they're able to come back to me. You know, recently a young person told us that, you know, you parents are very keen on expecting us to say thank you because you took me to school, because you bought me shoes, and you know, because we have food and you give us a big house. And they're saying, why should I thank you on that? That is your responsibility. And you're thinking, really? But you see, it is how different we are. We're coming from a generation where the first shoe I wore was when I was going to secondary school. I didn't have shoes, you
Yeah.
know. So when I got shoe, it really meant something.
Mm.
And so we asked the young man, so what then do you expect us to what is it that you will count as a privilege, as some good stuff that I've done as a parent? He said, your time. I just need your time. I want you to listen to me. And that need even grows bigger when you go into the 16 to 19-year-olds. So sometimes we think that they don't need us because they're actually sometimes away. I was talking to my wife and I was saying, they have closed. We need to be more available for them. I said, sometimes they sit there and they've all disappeared into their rooms. Yes. And they're still desiring the need to be listened to. So now you go into the age of 16 to 19 and you see more the desire to rebuild and identity, to recover an identity, a sense of independence. So they're trying to move away, which I think nature does very well in preparing us as human beings to live and be ourselves, but you still want to really, really belong. You want to be still, be very accepted. So having that conflict between wanting to belong but wanting to live is quite a challenge. And I think it's the parent that really counts a lot. And, I want to tie it to an experience that I've been seeing and which will go into the next stage. I've been receiving interns in the organization. And with that, sometimes I've noticed that there are those who come in and leave. Huge impact. I'll remember them for 5 years later on. There are those who leave, 6 months ago and I can't remember them. And you start asking, what makes the difference between the one who made a huge impact and the one who didn't? At some point, I thought, is it the university they've gone to?
Yeah.
Is it the primary school? But over time, I'm yet to really lay my hand on it, but I think parenting really has more to do with it than even the colleges we send our children. And therefore, as you can see, each of these stages is really building into the other one. So how much confidence did you build in the person? Let me bring this story a bit earlier, and I was going to talk about it later. But I've had one of the girls who once came to our office. We did an interview and she cried during the interview. She was a university student, I think in her third year. And she couldn't sit through an interview and she cried. I was like, oops. So we said, because she cried, we'll give her an opportunity. I mean, sometimes you don't have too much chances. But very interestingly, this young lady stood out, did amazing things in the organization, gave us our first newsletter. And so I see that giving an opportunity at these ages perhaps is the most important thing, and walking through with people, telling them, you know what, you will not always be in your best. But it is the persistence. It is a trying. It is not the output that you get now, but it is being able to walk through with this. So career mentorships, encouragement, internships become very, very important, volunteering. So giving an exposure to these young people at that age really, really helps them to build the confidence that they do require on that. Let me touch on the last one, then we can come back to any other questions that you see emerging from this. So into young adulthood. So I don't have this. My oldest daughter is in the 16 to 19 now. So I will not speak a lot from the experience, but perhaps from the experience of others. But what really will a woman need at this age, or a young adult for that matter, still to the boys? So I think the element of opportunity and recognition becomes very critical at these ages. I'm thinking about myself, after college, or even just before I got into college. I remember I got into small business. I was a hawker sort of in the streets. And I ended up setting up my own little thing back in the village. And one of the things that counted the most for me was when I could put aside some little money, buy some baking flour, and send home, and we make a party. That really made something for me. And I think that element of recognition and a role and giving an opportunity. So going into managing money, which of course you need to start very early, resources and working through with the girls at early stages is really, really important. Mentorship, giving an opportunity to belong to a group and doing innovation. So at African Institute for Children's Studies, we have a youth innovation hub, something that we are really trying to connect young people to create solutions and work in small groups to expand some of those solutions. I have some young man who's started a school at the age of 16, and now we move from 8 students now to 120, somewhere deep in the Mars Island. So how can we have more young people create those kind of solutions and be leaders? And for me, leadership is not because you are the president, fold their sleeves and pick the paper that has dropped on the street. Yes. So I think really giving opportunity for more collaboration as people get into the young adulthood is really important. If they can begin sharing rent together and they live together and do things together becomes really critical, even as one group of girls who know each other. Then the issues of mental health become very critical also. Again, I'm not saying this is the only stage you want to address it, but all of us need to be more aware, especially in the kind of generation that we are having. I think a whole redefinition of the work environment in a manner that it has never been in the human history. How do we walk them through that journey?
All right.
Let me stop the chat of that, and then maybe feel free to.
Yeah. I think for me, this slide just paints the picture of the reality that it's not just in one specific stage of life. It's right from the start, and it's from nutrition, and it's from taking care of mothers even before those children come. You've given us such a complete picture. And another thing that stands out for me is that throughout all these stages, a lot of things change for this girl, but the one constant remains is the parent. It's just the same parent throughout all this season. For me, that just speaks a lot into how much we need to focus on ourselves and work on ourselves and be able to drop all these things that really we have carried from our past and what we think works. And of course, there's a lot we need to borrow from what worked as well. But the shift really has to do with us. And just coming now to specifically, maybe some stories that you can share about how maybe just a small shift here and there served to really unlock the creativity in girls in your species.
Right. So I think I've a bit touched on one of those, but let me go back to an experience we had within our program that I think was really linked to self-esteem and how sometimes we'll be dealing with an issue and thinking, this person just has an issue. So there's a girl who we met in a project site, one of the schools we worked in, I think in Western Kenya. And for about 2 years, the teachers actually thought that either she had speech disability, she had challenges around how to communicate because she rarely spoke much. And she was, I think, around grade 4 at that stage. And they're wondering what we do. She doesn't speak much. It's affecting, of course, her academics and all that. And we had this project where we were looking at the risk of children dropping from school into child labor. And we were identifying those without school uniforms, appropriate school uniforms. And, so she had one of those that her dress had been patched at the back a number of times, the way you keep sewing so that you keep going with one cloth. And so within the project, we had resources to buy such uniforms. And when this girl was bought the uniform, she was different. She had more confidence speaking in the groups. She just stood out. Like, really? It was a uniform? But you see how one thing on presentation at the ages, around 10 years of age and all that really will impact on how a person will feel about themselves. It is really, really important. It is unfortunate that sometimes the resources that we allocate as governments to some of these things, or the insistence on things like uniform, could be the thing that is literally cutting off someone who has great potential. So I think for me that really stood out, and I've always asked myself, are you being conscious? Is it possible that a girl can weave through that with a bad uniform? Yes, but perhaps it requires then the confidence that has been built back at home, like I said earlier on. But if the mother always feels like, she can't get you a uniform, so it's really sad. So really what we communicate really, really matters in all that and how we do it. I think the other one that I already mentioned of this university student who really stood out just because she was given a chance. What stood out there was within the office setting, we made it really easy that, you can always ask the other person for their opinion. And you validate it, you accept it and integrate it in the decision making. And so with time, this person who came in feeling like they're really not even able to talk in a crowd, with time realize that, so actually my thoughts count. So I see that as a very two examples where accepting people and addressing things around the environment really can greatly impact on their self-esteem and their creativity.
Yeah, and I think for me, one of the things that I'm really taking out of this summit is the everyday stories, the little things. You see, it's the little things. It's things that you don't really think matter, like just providing uniform.
Right.
And that might seem very little to very small to one person, but it's a big deal to this girl. And I think that we can borrow that in our own spaces as communities and as individuals about that little thing, just that one thing that you are able to do to help boost, the confidence of and not just girls, but young people in general, the people that we have been told we've been given stewardship over, and people, the ones that we are mentoring. I also like what you have said, the connection between confidence and creativity, that for you to be creative and to be free, you really just have to believe in what it is you're doing and believe in yourself and not worry too much about approval, because the moment we start putting ourselves in boxes, it's the moment we actually lose creativity. So just thinking about that, how can fathers, mothers, mentors, I know you've alluded to it, but any more specific ways that we can support the creative risk-taking, and especially without putting a lot of pressure, because we bring in our own expectations there. So any other stories, any other ways that we can do that?
Yes, and maybe I will even borrow from my own experience being in a space where I founded companies and or business ventures and all that. I think the one thing that really encourages me, and I believe would be a great encouragement to young girls and boys too, is that we all have, just like the other cover I had, that's life. In life, there are always dips and ups.
Yeah.
So it shouldn't be very strange that an idea that I had that seemed to be doing very well at some point just collapses because there are too many other system level or macro level issues that impact. So I think sharing stories of failure from a point of learning is perhaps a very important thing to help people to have the confidence to try, and telling them, look, when you do things, it's not like they always be the best. So hearing more stories of how many billionaires have been several times bankrupt in their journey as billionaires is a really important things to be able to bring out in life. Many of us want to be parents who are always the A students, even when we were not. I think sharing my own story and saying, well, I was not necessarily an A student, but it is the sensitivity around the needs around me that perhaps actually makes you a more successful person. It's now with the age of AI, that's even becoming much more critical, because the things that made us stand out because you could do them much better, like coding in the computer world, is no longer required.
Can you imagine?
So if you measure of how great you are, and when you tell your children that how great they are is by how good they can code, then that is gone. So what has remained? But one thing that I think the AI will not replace is our ability to sense within your community, within the person you're meeting, the needs that they do have. And I'm not just talking about the physical needs, especially the emotional. I think this is going to be a space that will still require a lot of people. So I think helping people to appreciate that life is not about getting the event of the success, but it is the journey of doing it and building it. And the success is not always because you're at the top, but the success, can be defined very differently. But perhaps more importantly is, that there's an impact that you're making in people's lives, Yeah.
I don't think there's a time when our human skills have been needed as much as this season. Even for us in therapy now, when we have to be very careful with our clients, because they've already had an AI therapist for a while, and the AI therapist is really helping them diagnose what's going on and all that. And one of the things, and I know one of the areas we're even leaning more and more into is now the human aspect. There is something, even just online, you and I, as we are interacting like this, there's something happening at a physiological level that we are mirroring, whether it's calm, we are mirroring whether it's empathy or anxiety, that can never be taken up by AI. It's not able, because there's a physiological life, that's flowing through, and more and more we are really needing those skills. And what you're saying is part of that is really for us who are leaders in this space to learn to be vulnerable, to learn to be real. We people now are looking for those real connections, as because other solutions can be found.
Exactly. And I think when you ask about fathers, I think that's really an important space, because the days of what what is this guy who will climb all the tall buildings in New York?
Yes.
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 Being the father who can do that,
Yeah.
I think, yes, we don't have to be built around this Superman kind of father. But I think really being human in our journeys. And I think that sometimes we're even afraid and we want to shield our children from the difficult journeys that we are making. But I think then they miss out. They miss out so that when their journeys begin, they can't come back to me as a father and say, can you imagine the business I started, it failed? Because they've never had me say mine failed. But I think they will be much more empowered. Tell them, man, that thing I was doing, it flopped, it didn't work. We were going after this, and also tell them when it works out, And so I think that's really, we need to remain very human in our parenting journey, or in whichever space we are in, whether as a teacher or as a head of an organization, being able to walk with people that journey and tell them, look, life is not always about up in the mountains.
And I imagine that it's harder for dads to show up like that. I mean, it's easier for even today, this morning, when I was dropping my son off, I was just telling him how hard a night I had because I had to stay up till 2 a.m. to beat this deadline for a grant. And, I found it so easy to just talk. But I don't know, just speaking to that space and how difficult it is for men and what's working for you. We really want to normalize, especially these conversations around opening up and vulnerability, especially with the dads.
Right. Yeah, so that's what I was saying, that the Superman dads, unfortunately, we watch them and sometimes we imagine that's all I must be. But I think I find a lot of strength in even managing expectation when I share with my children what is it that I'm working on, and where am I seeing it can fail, or what is it that works out when it can. So I think really being a present dad, and that is where the point also, a lot of us miss it out. We are too much out there sweating out to try and take care of the family. But ultimately, when they're now these 25, 30-year-olds who are no longer in the house, what did they take away from it? Because we play a great role as role models. They are going to face life on their own. And the same things you're going through, they're going to have it without the benefit of having worked with you as a parent and known that, oh, so even daddy had moments when something didn't work out. Okay. So I think really walking with them through a lot of those steps. If you're building a home, for example, if you're buying a home, how can they be part of that conversation? Because they also get to learn how you're doing personal finances. How do you manage? How can we be comfortable in knowing we're never going to be our neighbor because we just have different, just like the fingers, we are different, but we can be comfortable, what we do have. And,
Yeah, and those are the practical things we are looking for even in this summit. Just those examples that you're giving. I'm building a house. Let's walk this journey together. I'm working on this project. Oh, this is what I'm anticipating to be difficult. And this is what I think is a big win for me. I don't think that's too much to ask in terms of just being open and vulnerable. And what you're saying is that those things really, really count in building their confidence and in helping them focus on the beauty of the process, right?
Exactly. And I would imagine when they're meeting, when you get to a stage maybe where you're beginning to develop partnerships, and even for marriage or other relationships, you don't come in and expect the other person to be all well-formed and everything. We all come in with our differences, and so I think that building that confidence in knowing that we can walk journeys together. There are times when I was looking for a bank loan and I will bring my girls and we'll pray together and say, they've said unless we meet these conditions. And when you're running business on your own, this is even more difficult because it's not like you take your salary and say, here it is, my pay slip. And sometimes you've not built your business to a point where you have a pay slip, and so you're not even loanable. How do we walk those journeys together with our own children so that they're part of it and perhaps even interest them in what we're doing? Because the other challenge that we are seeing in especially a lot of it in our continent, is how can our children get interested in some of these initiatives that we've built so that they don't die with our generation, they don't die with me. They get interested. It's not always that they will need to come into it, but it works better when there's a continuity, even within families around business. So are we finding days when we go with them to work and sit, work together? There's a day I went, we agreed on a one-day shift where they'll come and sit with me through in the office. And my second-born daughter, it was very unlucky for her that she found me on a day when we had to beat a deadline for a grant, just like we're doing. And we left the office at 1 a.m. But she was there, and I think that age she was just about 12 years old. So but I imagine there's something that was left in her
A lot. A lot.
around just what it takes to get some of these things.
Yeah, a lot, a lot. And we can afford those moments. We can afford that one day away with our
Exactly.
kids. We can, even if it's not our own businesses. I think
Yes.
the thing about this space is really to get those ideas so that we can even create communities where we are really allowing. And I know there are workplaces that allow that, but to just say these are the things that are working, and these are the things that could work, whether you are in the West or in the East or in the North or in the Sub-Saharan, these are things that really work and cut across. And the more we simplify them, the better, right?
Exactly. And one of the things that we've built and continued encouraging is cross-country kind of teams working together, encouraging people flying in, into Kenya, or we're beginning to work on how do we get some young people to go for short stay, 3 months in the US or in Europe and cross-country. But you will notice that even when you work with people from families that have greater wealth, and that the thing that they're all very keen on passing is around empathy, around being able to connect with luck. And in terms of needs, that there are people out there who are always living on half or less than what you are on. And so I think this is something that we really need to be keen on. We have what we call a youth leadership and innovation hub program, and we are keen on just linking young people across the globe to work on the small projects together. Because to me, I find that as one space where we can grow more tolerance for each other, we can be able to realize opportunities, because again, the businesses are built out of responding to the opportunities or the needs that are there within the society. So even as we think about how do we create employment, I think it really goes into even more to girls. There are programs that have been evaluated that have tried to show what works in doing this, even on a large scale. I've seen programs on livelihood in Uganda, Tanzania, and other places. I've worked in the refugee camp with projects, and a lot of it really goes into a peer-led kind of programs. So the more we allow the young people within our own households to be involved in volunteering, to be involved in working in small groups, solving some issue, the more we are preparing them for the world. Because really what the world will need, like we say, the AI can do a lot of some of these things, but the people skill is the person who has a greater investment on that, always going to win more than anything else, and that affects, the more they're more confident on how they relate with one another, the more they will manage things such as unplanned pregnancies, substance use, the fears around that. A lot of it will be managed by the more you've exposed these people, the young people, into greater relationship. So peer-led systems, we cannot lock our children and say, I want to keep mine safe away from the bad ones. Of course, it is how I've built my child from the house to feel confident when they will meet people, but because they have known who they are, then it is possible to manage the peer pressure that comes by wanting to belong.
Yeah, and that's where in attachment theory or attachment language in psychology, we say creating a safe haven at home, safe haven, so that it becomes a launching pad. And then they can launch and get out there and face the world and do what they need to do. But at the back of their mind, they know they can come back. There's a place, which is a safe haven as well. It's a place of safety. So it's really, again, in the home front that we can create those spaces. I also just like the peer-led initiatives that you are having, because that really builds team spirit, collaborative skills, which are very necessary. Problem solving. I'm sure when you were making the traps for mice when you were young, you were not doing it by yourselves.
Teams,
Yeah. And then even just some competition right there, like whose will be most effective. And my goodness, we caught a rat today. I think it's a lot of skills that are built in that space. So as we just think about the final words as we land this conversation, anything that you think, for example, there are so many myths about girls that we need to release. Are there any that come to mind for you in terms of just building their confidence?
Yes, it is actually very interesting that even in some of the very developed economies, we are still finding the perception that girls or women will not do certain roles, a certain decision-making level. We still have just about a third or less of women in some of the higher decision-making points. And it almost feels like you really can't trust women with some of those, it is not true. I mean, like I've said, personally, I fully believe that women will provide us even better leadership in many spaces. I believe a lot of women have the sixth sense, like we say. There's always the other feeling, intuition thing that will happen. So I believe it is really time that we completely trust it. And this trust will not happen because we change the government policy and the constitutions, and now they say you must have 2/3 and you must have this. It really begins from home, because the more the girls feel confident from home, the more they will be able to make themselves available in the decision-making spaces, and demand some of that. So I think for me, that's the one thing we really want to unpack, and not to make it feel like women cannot be confident leaders in some spaces. Yes.
Yeah, and allowing their voices to count and encouraging them to use their voice there.
Exactly. Like the example I gave earlier on, just because she came in crying from an interview, but over time, because there are a lot of times when she was told, okay, that's what you want to try, let's try it, come and show it, and being guided through, and being, so allowing people to accept criticism as a good thing, as a good feedback for improvement, I think really helps them to take on the next challenge with even greater confidence.
And it just, you keep coming back to that story because it's actually very important. They just giving someone an opportunity, even though in the eyes of society they have completely ruined it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
Exactly. Yeah.
as we learned this, then what are your final words to girls, to dads, to moms, just with regard to this topic, on how to really nurture creativity and confidence?
So one is really, I want to tell my daughters and the girls around my spaces that, look, you are not different from the boys. Number one, you have been created to be very special, and there's no one like you. You have a special role that nobody is going to change that. And I know a lot of times we ask ourselves, so what exactly is that role? How do I tell it? It will come in different ways. I was telling some young people the other day, there are those of us at the age of 2, it's very clear what role we're going to play. There are those of us who we discover it at 30, like me, and I'm like, okay, this is going to be my role. There are those of us like the owner of KFC at 60 is when you discover, oh, I can be the one who can roll out the KFC. But in all that, I think what is really important is we as parents at every of these stages, we who have responsibility to nurture a child at every stage, to encourage them in the various mistakes that they're going to make. So mistakes are not bad. Errors are not bad. It is really how we're able to pick out of that, each of those stages, and say, I've learned this, so I can do it in another way. And being different is really a good thing. So don't always seek to conform. It's not the number of likes on your Facebook page or Instagram or TikTok that really count most. It is really who you are, how you define yourself, and what is it that the differences that you want to make that count. So I think all of us have the important role of just, being able to pick on this and nurture it and encourage it in the young people, the young girls that we do meet. And that way, their creative element will naturally come out, because then they will not be afraid to stand out. Creativity does not require people who conform to the patterns. If you conform to the pattern, then you're never going to be creative. You've got to be willing to take the risk and be different.
I don't think there's a better statement to end this conversation. Creativity does not come for conforming.
Yeah.
And that when you provide the right environment, it just naturally flows out. So we can't force or carve or create creativity. We provide a certain environment and then it naturally springs forth. Thank you so much, Sam. I mean, for just reminding us the importance of doing that right from nutrition, through being vulnerable, through being present, through sharing your mistakes, through coming alongside with your child when they are making mistakes, or not just your child, but the young people in your space, and not writing them off because of one or two things. There's so much richness to this conversation, and I thank you for bringing that to us. And for those who are here and would like to get in touch with the work that Sam does at African Institute of, is it Child Studies or Children's Studies?
Children's Studies.
Children's Studies. Yes, we will have all the information in the summit resources, and you can connect with the amazing work that Sam does. Thank you very much, Sam.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you so much for organizing this. I'm glad that you are here as a role model, the girl who's standing up, creative and confident.
Thank you.
You're doing well.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you.